Kang wiped sweat from his forehead as he walked through the thick jungle. The air was hot and wet, making his clothes stick to his skin. He had been on planet Tursus for 3 months now, studying its strange plants and animals. Day 87 on Tursus. Kang spoke into his wrist recorder. The weather is hot as usual. I'm heading to the western area to map more of the jungle. Kang was a scientist who studied alien life. He was 30 years old, with short black hair and strong arms from climbing and hiking. Back on Earth, his parents had wanted him to become a doctor, but Kang had always dreamed of seeing other worlds. The jungle around him was nothing like Earth's forests. The trees had purple leaves that turned to follow the sun. Strange sounds came from all directions, clicks, whistles, and low rumbles. Some plants gave off sweet smells, while others stank like rotten eggs. Kang checked his scanner. It showed the safe path through the jungle, away from the most dangerous areas. Tursus had many deadly creatures. The worst was the gulper, a giant animal like a mix between a frog and a snake. It could swallow creatures whole. The gulper hasn't been seen in this area for weeks, Kang said to himself. Should be safe enough. He pushed through a curtain of hanging vines and stepped into a small clearing. Suddenly, he froze. There, kneeling by a pool of water, was something he had never seen before up close, a luminary. The luminary were the intelligent beings native to this planet. They looked somewhat human-shaped, but their skin glowed with soft blue and green lights that pulsed like gentle heartbeats. This one seemed smaller than others Kang had seen from a distance. The luminary noticed him and jumped up, clearly startled. It was a female, Kang realized. She had a delicate face with large, silvery eyes that had no pupils. Her head had no hair, but instead a crown of small, glowing tendrils that moved slightly like underwater plants. She wore simple clothes made of woven fibers. Kang raised his hands to show he meant no harm. "Hello," he said softly. "I'm not going to hurt you." The luminary female tilted her head, watching him with curious eyes. She said something in her language, a series of musical sounds and clicks that Kang couldn't understand. Kang pointed to himself. "I am Kang," he said slowly. The luminary seemed to understand the gesture. She pointed to herself and made a sound that Kang tried to copy. "Nary," he attempted. She nodded, the lights on her skin brightening slightly. "Nary," she repeated, then pointed at him. "Kang," he said again. "Kang," she echoed, the word sounding strange in her musical voice. Kang smiled and took a careful step forward. Nary didn't back away, which he took as a good sign. She was collecting plants and putting them in a small bag at her waist. Kang recognized some of them as medicinal herbs that the research team had identified. "You're a healer?" he asked, miming the action of treating a wound. Nary watched his movements, then nodded. She made a similar gesture, then pointed to the plants. For the next hour, they attempted to communicate through gestures and simple words. Kang learned that Nary had wandered far from her village to find special plants. The lights on her skin seemed to change color slightly with her emotions, brightening when she was excited, dimming when she seemed concerned. Kang showed her his scanner, and Nary jumped back when she saw the moving images on it. Then, cautiously, she reached out a finger to touch the screen. She made an excited trilling sound when the image changed at her touch. "It's just technology," Kang said with a smile. "Nothing magic about it." The sun was getting lower in the sky. Nary looked up at it and made gestures that Kang understood to mean she needed to return to her people. She began to gather her things. "I can help you get back," Kang offered, pointing in different directions as a question. Nary pointed toward a distant ridge of hills. That must be where her village was located. Kang checked his scanner. It wasn't far, but they would need to move quickly before dark. They set off together, Kang occasionally checking his scanner to make sure they were headed in the right direction. Nary moved with surprising grace through the jungle, often showing Kang easier paths that his scanner hadn't identified. As they walked, the ground beneath them suddenly trembled. Kang stopped, holding up his hand for Nary to do the same. The vibration came again, stronger this time. The trees around them swayed slightly. "That's not good," Kang muttered, checking his scanner rapidly. The screen flashed a red warning. Nary's skin dimmed, the glowing patterns fading to a dull blue. She made urgent sounds and grabbed Kang's arm, pulling him in the direction they had been heading. Another tremor shook the ground, stronger than before. Kang heard a distant crashing sound, like trees being pushed over. He knew what it was before his scanner confirmed it. "Gulper," he said, his mouth going dry. "It's a gulper heading this way." Nary seemed to recognize the word, or perhaps his fear. Her grip on his arm tightened, and the lights on her skin pulsed rapidly in what Kang guessed was alarm. "Run," Kang shouted, pulling Nary along as he began to sprint through the jungle. They crashed through undergrowth, no longer caring about the noise they made. Kang's scanner showed the gulper moving fast in their direction, drawn perhaps by their movement or scent. The crashes behind them grew louder. Kang risked a glance back and saw trees shaking violently about 100 meters behind them. He couldn't see the creature yet, but he knew it was close. "This way," he yelled, pulling Nary toward a rocky outcrop that might offer some protection. If they could reach it, they might be able to hide in crevices too small for the gulper to reach. Just as they neared the rocks, the ground shook so hard that both of them stumbled. Nary fell, her leg twisting underneath her. She made a high-pitched sound of pain. Kang turned back to help her up, but froze in horror at what he saw. The gulper burst through the trees behind them. It was enormous, at least 15 meters long, with a body like a massive snake, but with a head resembling a giant frog. Its skin was mottled green and brown, perfect camouflage in the jungle. Its mouth was the most terrifying part, a gaping maw that could stretch wide enough to swallow a small car. Its bulbous eyes fixed on them, and it surged forward with shocking speed for something so large. "Get up," Kang screamed, grabbing Nary's arm and pulling her to her feet. She stumbled, clearly injured, but managed to stand. They were just meters from the rocks when the ground beneath them seemed to explode. The gulper had tunneled under them, a hunting tactic Kang had read about but never witnessed. It erupted from the ground directly in their path, its huge mouth open wide. Kang shoved Nary hard to one side, but her injured leg gave way. As she fell, the gulper lunged. Its massive jaws closed around her, and in one horrible gulp, Nary vanished inside its mouth. "No," Kang screamed, stumbling backward. The gulper turned its cold eyes toward him, but seemed momentarily satisfied with its catch. It began to retreat, its massive body slithering away through the trees. Kang stood frozen in shock for just a second before his mind started racing. The gulper didn't kill its prey immediately. It swallowed them whole and digested them slowly over hours. Nary might still be alive inside. He reached for his communicator. "Base, this is Kang. Emergency. A luminary has been swallowed by a gulper near grid point 27B. I need backup immediately." The reply came quickly. "Kang, this is Base. Stay where you are. Rescue team deploying now. ETA 40 minutes. Kang watched as the gulper moved away, disappearing into the jungle. 40 minutes would be too late. The creature would be far away by then, and Nary would be that much closer to death. He checked his equipment. He had his plasma cutter, a small medical kit, and his scanner. Not much to go against one of the deadliest predators on Tursus. Kang made his decision. "Base, the creature is moving away. I'm going to follow it. Send the team to track my signal." "Negative, Kang. Do not pursue. Wait for backup." But Kang was already moving, following the path of broken vegetation left by the massive creature. His heart pounded with fear, but he couldn't leave Nary to die. He had to try to save her, no matter the risk. "I'm coming, Nary," he whispered as he ran. "Hold on." Kang ran through the jungle, following the trail of broken plants left by the gulper. His lungs burned and sweat soaked his clothes, But he didn't slow down. He knew the gulper would find a quiet place to rest and digest its meal. He had to reach it before Neri was hurt too badly by the stomach acids. "Kang, come in. What is your position?" His communicator buzzed with the voice of Dr. Lee, the head scientist at the base. "I'm about 1 kilometer west of where the attack happened," Kang replied between heavy breaths. "The gulper is moving slower now. I think it's looking for a place to rest." This is madness. The gulper's stomach contains powerful acids. The luminary girl could already be. "She's not dead," Kang cut in firmly. "Gulpers have a slow digestive system. It takes hours to break down large prey. I studied their biology, remember? Even so, what do you plan to do? You can't fight that creature alone." Kang jumped over a fallen log. "I'm not planning to fight it. Once it settles down to digest, it will enter a sleep-like state. That's when I'll act." "And do what exactly?" Dr. Lee sounded both angry and worried. Kang patted the plasma cutter hanging from his belt. "I'll cut Neri out." The silence that followed told Kang exactly what Dr. Lee thought of this plan. "The rescue team is on the way," Dr. Lee finally said. "Wait for them. They'll be too late. I'm turning off my communicator to save power. I'll check in when I can." Kang switched off the device before Dr. Lee could argue further. He needed to focus now. The trail led to a large clearing where several trees had been knocked down. The gulper had passed through recently, but it wasn't here now. Kang carefully scanned the area and spotted a large hole in the ground at the far end of the clearing. "A burrow," he whispered to himself. Gulpers often dug underground chambers to rest and digest their food safely. Kang approached the hole cautiously. It was about 2 meters wide, large enough for the gulper to fit through. He could see that the sides of the hole were smooth, like a tunnel. The gulper had gone down there with Neri. He took a deep breath and checked his equipment one last time. He had his plasma cutter, a small med kit, a flashlight, and his portable scanner. Not much to go against one of the deadliest creatures on Tursus, but it would have to do. "I'm coming, Neri," he muttered, then entered the tunnel. The passage sloped downward at a gentle angle. It was dark, so Kang turned on his flashlight. The air was damp and had a strong, unpleasant smell. He moved slowly, trying not to make any noise. The last thing he wanted was to wake the gulper if it was sleeping. After about 50 meters, the tunnel opened into a large underground chamber. Kang pressed himself against the wall and peered around. His flashlight beam cut through the darkness, and there it was, the gulper, curled up in the middle of the chamber. Its massive body rose and fell with slow breaths. It appeared to be in the sleep-like state that came after feeding. Kang crept closer, keeping his movements slow and quiet. The creature didn't stir. When he was about 10 meters away, he stopped to consider his approach. The gulper's skin was tough. It would take the plasma cutter time to cut through it. He needed to find the thinnest part of its hide. As he studied the beast, Kang noticed something strange. Parts of the gulper's stomach were glowing faintly from inside. That had to be Neri's bioluminescent skin. She was still alive, still producing light. Hope surged through Kang. He hadn't come too late. Moving with new determination, Kang circled around to where the glow was strongest. He could see the outline of Neri's body through the gulper's stretched skin. This was where he would cut. He took out his plasma cutter and set it to its highest setting. The tool hummed to life, its blue energy blade glowing in the darkness. Kang took a deep breath and pressed the cutter against the gulper's hide. The plasma blade sizzled as it met the creature's skin. A strong smell like burning rubber filled the air. The gulper's body twitched, but it didn't wake up. Kang kept cutting, making a straight line about 1 meter long. Sweat dripped into his eyes as he worked. The cut was only halfway through the thick hide. Kang's arms began to ache from holding the plasma cutter steady, but he couldn't stop now. Finally, the blade broke through to the inside of the stomach. A gush of foul-smelling liquid spilled out, burning where it touched Kang's boots. He jumped back, then stepped forward again to continue cutting. He had to work faster now. The pain might wake the gulper soon. With a final surge of effort, Kang completed the cut. The gulper's stomach wall parted, revealing a glimpse of the glowing blue form inside. More stomach fluid poured out, and Kang had to turn his face away from the stench. The gulper shifted, its massive body uncoiling slightly. Its breathing became less regular. It was waking up. "No, not yet," Kang whispered. He needed more time. He wedged his hands into the cut and pulled, forcing the opening wider. The gulper's skin was slippery and tough, but Kang managed to create a gap large enough for a person to fit through. Inside, he could see Neri. Her body was curled up, and her skin glowed only faintly now. She wasn't moving. The gulper shifted again, more violently this time. A low rumble came from its throat. Kang knew he had seconds, not minutes. He reached into the stomach cavity and grabbed Neri's arm. Her skin was slick with stomach fluids, making it hard to get a good grip. He pulled, but she was stuck in the thick digestive juices. With a growl of frustration, Kang did the only thing he could think of. He climbed headfirst into the opening he had cut, pushing himself into the gulper's stomach. The stench was overwhelming inside, and the acid burned his skin. The space was tight and hot, like a sauna filled with chemicals. Kang could feel his exposed skin starting to blister from the acids, but he ignored the pain. He managed to get his arms around Neri's waist. Her body was limp, but he could feel a faint pulse where his hand touched her neck. She was alive, but barely. "I've got you," he said, though he wasn't sure if she could hear him. "Let's get out of here." Kang began to push backward, trying to pull Neri with him toward the opening. Her body moved slowly through the thick stomach fluids. It was like trying to pull someone through mud. Suddenly, the entire stomach chamber shook violently. The gulper was fully awake now. Its body twisted and writhed, making it even harder for Kang to move. "No, no, no," Kang grunted, redoubling his efforts. They were almost at the opening. A deafening roar echoed through the chamber as the gulper realized something was wrong. The stomach muscles began to contract around Kang and Neri, trying to crush the intruder. With one final, desperate heave, Kang pushed Neri through the opening and out of the stomach. He quickly followed, scrambling backward as the gulper's body began to thrash wildly around the chamber. Kang scooped Neri's limp form into his arms. Her skin was pale, the normal bright glow now just a faint flicker. Stomach acids had burned parts of her body, leaving angry red marks. She needed medical help immediately. The gulper's huge head swung around, its bulbous eyes focusing on them. It opened its massive mouth and let out another roar that shook the very walls of the underground chamber. "Time to go," Kang muttered. With Neri in his arms, he ran toward the tunnel entrance. The gulper lunged after them, its massive body uncoiling like a spring. Kang could feel its hot breath on his back as he reached the tunnel. The passage was too small for the gulper's head to fit through at once, giving Kang precious seconds to escape. He ran up the sloping tunnel, his legs burning with effort. Neri was light, but carrying her while running uphill was still exhausting. Behind him, he could hear the gulper forcing its flexible body into the tunnel, pursuing them with angry determination. Kang's lungs felt like they were on fire, but he didn't slow down. The light at the end of the tunnel grew brighter. They were almost out. With a final burst of speed, Kang emerged from the hole into the clearing. The sudden daylight was blinding after the darkness of the tunnel. He stumbled forward, still clutching Neri tightly. A loud crash came from behind as the gulper burst out of the tunnel. Kang risked a glance back and saw the creature's huge head, its mouth open wide to reveal rows of curved teeth. Just then, a series of bright flashes lit up the clearing. Loud shots rang out, and the gulper reared back, roaring in pain. The rescue team had arrived. "Kang, over here," someone shouted. Kang spotted several figures in protective gear at the edge of the clearing. They were firing stun weapons at the gulper, keeping it at bay. With his last bit of strength, Kang carried Nari toward his teammates. As soon as he reached them, medical staff took Nari from his arms and placed her on a stretcher. "You're crazy, you know that," Dr. Lee said, helping Kang sit down as his legs finally gave out. "But you did it. You actually got her out." Kang couldn't answer. He was too exhausted to speak. He just watched as the medics worked on Nari, cleaning the acids from her skin and giving her oxygen. Behind them, the Gulper had retreated back into its burrow, driven away by the stun weapons. The danger was past, at least for now. "Will she live?" Kang finally managed to ask. Dr. Lee looked at the medics working on Nari. "Thanks to you, she has a chance. Let's get you both back to base." As they lifted him onto another stretcher, Kang reached out and touched Nari's hand. Her skin flickered slightly brighter at his touch. It was a small sign, but enough to give him hope. "Hang on, Nari," he whispered. "The worst is over." The ride back to the research base was rough. The rescue team's vehicle bumped over the uneven jungle floor, making Kang wince with every jolt. His skin burned where the Gulper's stomach acids had touched him, but he ignored his own pain, keeping his eyes on Nari. She lay on a stretcher across from him. 2 medics worked on her, washing the acids from her skin and checking her breathing. Her natural glow was very weak now, just a faint blue light that flickered like a dying bulb. "How is she?" Kang asked for the 3rd time since they had started moving. Dr. Hana, the chief medical officer, looked up from Nari with worried eyes. "Not good. The acids have damaged her skin badly, and her breathing is weak. But she'll live, right?" Kang pressed. Dr. Hana didn't answer right away. "We don't know enough about luminary physiology, Kang. We're doing our best." Kang leaned back, his heart heavy. He had gotten Nari out of the Gulper, but it might have been too late. The vehicle suddenly lurched to a stop, throwing everyone forward. "What's happening?" Dr. Lee called to the driver. "Something's blocking the road," the driver called back. "It looks like." "Oh no." Kang felt a cold dread in his stomach. He knew what it was before anyone said it. "It's the Gulper," Dr. Lee said, looking out the front window. "It must have circled around to cut us off." Kang pushed himself up to see. Sure enough, the massive creature was stretched across the path ahead. Its skin was marked with burns from the stun weapons, and it looked angry. Very angry. "Can we go around it?" Dr. Lee asked. The driver shook his head. "The jungle is too thick on both sides. We get stuck." "Then we fight it," said one of the security team members, raising his stun weapon. "No," Dr. Lee said firmly. "Those weapons just made it mad last time. They won't stop it if it's determined to attack." Kang looked at Nari. She needed to get to the medical center quickly. They couldn't wait for the Gulper to leave, and they couldn't fight it effectively. An idea came to him. A crazy, dangerous idea. "I know what to do," Kang said, standing up despite the pain in his burned legs. "But I need a stronger plasma cutter and some rope." "What are you planning?" Dr. Lee asked, eyes narrowed. "The Gulper wants me and Nari. It's angry that I took its meal, so I'll give it what it wants. Sort of." Everyone stared at him like he was crazy. Maybe he was. 10 minutes later, Kang stood at the open back door of the vehicle, wearing a protective suit and holding a heavy-duty plasma cutter. A long rope was tied around his waist, with the other end secured inside the vehicle. "This is insane," Dr. Lee said for the 5th time. "If that thing swallows you again." "It won't," Kang cut in. "Just be ready to drive the moment I give the signal." Before anyone could argue further, Kang jumped out and walked toward the Gulper. His heart hammered in his chest, but he kept moving forward. The Gulper saw him immediately, its huge eyes fixed on him, and it made a low rumbling sound. Slowly, it began to uncoil its massive body, rising up to its full height. "That's right," Kang called out. "It's me, the one who cut you open. Come and get me." The gulper let out a deafening roar and lunged forward. Kang dodged to the side, barely avoiding its massive jaws. He needed to lead it away from the vehicle, but not too far because of the rope tied to his waist. He ran to a large tree about 20 meters from the path. The gulper followed, its huge body slithering across the ground with surprising speed. Kang circled the tree, then stopped and faced the creature. "Come on," he muttered, "just a little closer." The gulper reared up, ready to strike. This was his chance. Kang activated the plasma cutter. Its blade hummed with energy, much stronger than his smaller tool from before. As the gulper lunged, Kang dived under its attack and slashed at its underside with the plasma cutter. The blade cut deep, and the gulper shrieked in pain. It twisted away, then came at him again from a different angle. Kang continued this dangerous dance, dodging the gulper's attacks and cutting it whenever he could. He wasn't trying to kill it. That would be nearly impossible with just a plasma cutter. He had a different goal. After several minutes, the gulper began to slow down. Green blood oozed from multiple wounds on its body. Its attacks became less coordinated. It was weakening, just as Kang had hoped. Now for the most dangerous part. Kang positioned himself directly in front of the vehicle, about 10 meters away. The gulper faced him, swaying slightly. "One last time," Kang said, gripping the plasma cutter tightly. "Come get me." The gulper gathered itself and lunged forward with all its remaining strength. This time, Kang didn't dodge. Instead, he stood his ground until the last possible moment, then dropped flat on his stomach. The gulper sailed over him, missing by centimeters. Its momentum carried it past Kang and slammed it into the side of the vehicle. The impact stunned the creature momentarily. Kang jumped up and ran to the gulper's head. Without hesitation, he plunged the plasma cutter into one of its bulbous eyes. The creature screamed in agony, its body thrashing wildly. Kang barely avoided being crushed as he backed away. "Now, go," he yelled to the driver. The vehicle's engine roared to life. It began to move, driving around the wounded gulper as it writhed on the ground. Kang ran alongside, keeping pace as best he could with his injured legs. Just as he reached for the open door, the gulper's tail whipped around and caught him across the back. The blow sent Kang flying through the air. He hit the ground hard, the breath knocked from his lungs. The rope around his waist went tight as the vehicle continued moving. It began to drag Kang across the rough ground. He couldn't get up, couldn't call out to stop the vehicle. Behind him, the gulper was recovering. Despite its wounds, it wasn't giving up. It slithered after Kang, determined to have its revenge. Kang felt hands grab him. Someone had jumped out of the moving vehicle to help. It was Dr. Lee. He lifted Kang and half-carried, half-dragged him to the vehicle. "Hurry," Dr. Lee shouted. "It's coming." They reached the back door, and other hands pulled them inside. The door slammed shut just as the gulper slammed into the vehicle again. The impact nearly tipped them over, but the driver kept control. "Go, go, go," Dr. Lee yelled. The vehicle surged forward, picking up speed. The gulper tried to follow, but its injuries slowed it down. Soon, they had left it behind. Kang lay on the floor of the vehicle, gasping for breath. Every part of his body hurt, but they had escaped. They were going to make it back to base. That, Dr. Lee said, shaking his head, was either the bravest or the stupidest thing I have ever seen. Kang managed a weak smile. Maybe both. Dr. Lee helped him onto a seat. "Maybe both," he agreed. Kang looked over at Nari. Her condition hadn't improved. If anything, she looked worse. Her glow was barely visible now, and her breathing had become shallow and irregular. "Faster," Kang called to the driver. "She's getting worse." The vehicle picked up speed, bouncing harder over the rough ground. No one complained about the bumpy ride. They all knew Neri's life depended on reaching the base quickly. 20 minutes later, they arrived at the research base. Medical staff rushed out to meet them, taking Neri immediately to the medical center. Kang tried to follow, but his legs gave out as soon as he stood up. Two people caught him before he hit the ground. "You're going to the medical center too," Dr. Lee said firmly. No arguments. Kang didn't have the strength to argue anyway. He let them put him on a stretcher and carry him inside. As they passed through the corridors, people stopped to stare. Word of what Kang had done was already spreading through the base. In the medical center, they put him in a bed next to Nari. A team of doctors and scientists surrounded her, working frantically to save her life. Her skin had almost no glow left now. Even Kang, with his limited knowledge of luminary physiology, could tell she was slipping away. A doctor came to treat Kang's burns and other injuries, but he barely noticed. His eyes stayed fixed on Nari. He had risked everything to save her from the Gulber, but it seemed it wasn't enough. "Please," he whispered, "don't die." As if she had heard him, Nari's eyes suddenly opened. They were silver and without pupils, but somehow Kang could tell she was looking at him. Her hand moved slightly, reaching toward him. Ignoring the doctor's protests, Kang got out of bed and moved to Nari's side. He took her hand in his. It was cold and barely glowing. "I'm here," he said. "You're safe now." Nari made a soft sound, like music almost too quiet to hear. Then her eyes closed again, and her hand went limp in his. "No," Kang cried. "Nari." The machines monitoring her vital signs began to beep urgently. The doctors pushed Kang aside, working desperately to revive her. Kang watched in horror, unable to help. "We're losing her," one doctor said. "Her system is shutting down." "Do something," Kang shouted. Dr. Hana looked at him, her eyes sad. "We don't know what else to do, Kang. We don't understand her biology well enough." Kang felt a wave of helplessness wash over him. He had fought so hard to save Nari, only to lose her now. It wasn't fair. Suddenly, an alarm sounded from the base's security system. Dr. Lee's communicator beeped, and he answered it quickly. "What?" he said, his face going pale as he listened. "How many? Tell them to wait outside. Do not, I repeat, do not threaten them." "What is it?" Kang asked. Dr. Lee looked at him with wide eyes. "Luminary, at least 30 of them, outside the base. They're asking for Nari, and for you." "Luminary. Here." Kang's heart leaped with hope. "Let me talk to them." "You're injured," Dr. Lee pointed out. "You can barely stand." "They asked for me specifically," Kang insisted. "They might be able to help Nari." Dr. Lee hesitated, then nodded. "Fine, but you go in a wheelchair." Minutes later, Kang was wheeled to the entrance of the base. His burns had been quickly treated and bandaged, but the pain was still strong. He ignored it as the doors opened to reveal the group of luminary waiting outside. They were beautiful and strange, their skin glowing with patterns of blue and green light. They wore simple clothes made of woven plant fibers. At the front stood a tall male with intricate light patterns across his chest. His glow was stronger than the others, marking him as important. The luminary leader stepped forward, looking at Kang with silver eyes that showed no pupils. When he spoke, it was in broken but understandable human language. "You are Kang?" he asked. Kang nodded. "Yes. And you are?" "I am Darrow, father of Nari." The luminary's lights pulsed faster. "Where is my daughter?" "She's in our medical center," Kang said. "She's very sick from the Gulper's stomach acids. Our doctors are trying to save her, but—" He couldn't finish the sentence. Darrow turned to his group and made a series of musical sounds. 3 luminaries stepped forward carrying bags made of leaves. Kang recognized them as healers by the spiral light patterns on their arms, similar to what Nari had. "These are our healers," Darrow said. "They bring medicine for Nari. Will you allow them to help?" "Yes, please," Kang said immediately, before any of the human scientists could object. "This way." The healers followed as Kang was wheeled back to the medical center. Dr. Lee and the other humans looked nervous but didn't interfere. When they reached Nari, The human doctor stepped back to let the luminary approach. The three healers circled Neri's bed, making soft, musical sounds to each other. They opened their leaf bags and took out various plants, some of which Kang recognized from his studies of the jungle. They crushed the plants together in a wooden bowl, adding water to make a thick paste. One healer gently spread the paste over Neri's burns, while another placed different leaves on her forehead and chest. The third began a soft, rhythmic humming that made the lights on all their skins pulse in sync. "What are they doing?" Dr. Hana whispered to Kang. "Some kind of healing ritual," Kang replied. "The plants probably have medicinal properties that help neutralize the acids." They watched in silence as the healers worked. After about 20 minutes, something amazing happened. Neri's skin began to glow brighter. The light patterns that had almost disappeared now pulsed with renewed strength. "It's working," Kang said, his voice full of wonder. The healers continued their work for another hour. During this time, more luminary entered the medical center, including Darrow. They stood quietly, watching the healers work. The human medical staff observed with fascination, taking notes on the treatment. Finally, Neri's eyes opened. She made a series of musical sounds, and Darrow rushed to her side. They touched foreheads in what seemed to be a gesture of affection. Neri was still weak, but she was awake and responding. Then Neri looked around until her eyes found Kang. She said something to her father, who turned to Kang. "My daughter wishes to speak with you," Darrow said. "Alone." The room cleared slowly, both humans and luminary filing out. Only Kang remained, sitting in his wheelchair next to Neri's bed. When everyone was gone, he took her hand carefully. "I'm so glad you're okay," he said. "I was afraid we'd lost you." Neri tilted her head, studying his face. Then, to Kang's surprise, she spoke in halting human language. "You saved me from belly of beast." Her voice was musical, like wind chimes. "You speak our language?" Kang asked, amazed. "Little. Learn from listening to humans in forest." She touched one of his bandages gently. "You hurt because of me." Kang shook his head. "It doesn't matter. What matters is that you're alive." Neri's skin glowed brighter, the pattern shifting to a warm golden color. Kang guessed this might be her version of a blush or smile. "My people think humans dangerous," she said. "I think some humans good. You good." "Not all humans are good," Kang admitted, "but most of us try to be." Neri nodded slowly. "Same with my people." They talked for as long as Neri had strength, which wasn't very long. Kang learned that she was indeed a healer in training. Her people, the Luminary, lived in small villages throughout the jungle. They knew about the human research base, but had avoided contact until now. "Rest now," Kang said when he saw Neri's eyelids drooping. "We can talk more when you're stronger." Neri's hand tightened on his. "You stay near." "I'll be right here," Kang promised. Over the next few days, both Kang and Neri recovered from their injuries. The luminary healers continued to treat Neri, while also sharing some of their medicines with the human doctors to help heal Kang's acid burns. The exchange of medical knowledge benefited both sides. Darrow explained to the humans that the luminary had been watching them for months, unsure whether to make contact. When Neri didn't return to the village, search parties had been sent out. They hadn't found her, but they had encountered other humans who told them about Kang's brave rescue. Our stories speak of a time when strangers would come from the sky, Darrow told Kang and Dr. Lee one evening. Some stories say these strangers would bring destruction. Others say they would bring new knowledge. We did not know which stories to believe. "And now?" Dr. Lee asked. Darrow looked at Kang. "Now we know that, like us, the Sky People have both good and bad among them. But those who would risk their lives for one not of their kind. These are people we can trust." A week after the rescue, Kang was well enough to walk without help. Neri too had recovered much of her strength. The human scientists and luminary elders had begun formal talks about sharing knowledge and resources. On a warm afternoon, Kang took Nari for a walk outside the base. Her people had set up a temporary camp nearby, and many luminary watched with curiosity as the human and one of their own walked together. "My father says I can continue learning healing," Nari said, her human speech improving daily. "But now I will learn both luminary and human medicine." "That's wonderful," Kang said, genuinely happy for her. "You'll be a bridge between our peoples." They stopped at the edge of the jungle, looking out at the alien landscape that was home to Nari, and still so strange to Kang. "Will you visit my village?" Nari asked. "There is much I could show you." Kang smiled. "I'd like that very much." Nari's skin glowed brighter, patterns dancing across her arms and face. She reached out and touched his hand gently. "The Gulper is feared by my people. Those it takes are considered lost forever. No luminary has ever saved another from inside a Gulper." "Well, I'm not luminary," Kang said with a small laugh. "No," Nari agreed. "You are human, but perhaps that is why you could do what we thought impossible." She looked at him with her silver eyes. "My people have a saying, what seems impossible to one may be possible to another. I think this is why different peoples should learn from each other." Kang nodded. "On Earth, my home world, we have a similar saying. Nothing is impossible until it's been proven impossible." They stood in comfortable silence for a while, watching the strange birds of Tursus fly over the purple trees. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. Later that evening, a celebration was held. Both humans and luminary gathered around large fires outside the research base. There was food from both cultures, music, and storytelling. A highlight came when Daro asked Kang to step forward. In front of everyone, the luminary leader placed a necklace around Kang's neck. It was made of small glowing stones that pulsed with the same rhythm as luminary skin. "This marks you as a friend of the luminary," Daro announced. "The story of how you saved my daughter from the belly of the Gulper will be told for generations. It will remind us that courage and kindness can exist in any form, from any world." The luminary raised their voices in a beautiful harmony that made the stones on Kang's necklace glow brighter. The humans applauded, many with tears in their eyes. As Kang returned to his seat, Nari caught his hand. "Now you are part of my people's story," she said, "and I am part of yours." Kang smiled, touching the glowing necklace. "I think this is just the beginning of our story," he said. Nari's skin glowed with patterns of gold and blue. "I think you are right." Above them, the stars of an alien sky twinkled, some perhaps holding worlds where other humans and other beings looked up and wondered if they were alone. On Tursus, at least, two peoples from different worlds had found each other, not in war or fear, but in an act of courage and compassion that had bridged the vast distance between their origins. And it had all started because a human had been willing to reach into the belly of a monster to save someone different from himself.